Hi, I'm Amanda McKay. I'm a professional artist, and I'm making these videos to give you tips to help enhance your creativity. This tip for this video is actually more of a riddle or a thought experiment, but it's definitely worth thinking about as it applies to your own creative practice because it can give you all sorts of ideas and breakthroughs with your art. So this is based on a statement that I heard at my very first art class in college, and that's that the professor said, and that's that all art is self-portrait. And that's something that's worth considering whether you agree with it or not. But I'll talk about this a little bit more. As I said, this was my very first art class in college, and it was also the very first assignment where he made this statement. And this was a 3D design class, which is not the same as a sculpting class. It's just about coming up with ideas rather than with the design, rather than just using clay or stone or something to sculpt. It's different than that. And I'll tell you, the first assignment was to come up with a container that had an inside and outside that were different textures, different materials, and then also there was supposed to be an interesting way to access, to go from the outside to the inside of the container, as opposed to just, like, it was supposed to be more than just lifting a lid off of a box to see inside. And the professor had given an example that a student had done in a class maybe a year or two ago, where she had actually knitted or something. It was like made out of fabric, and you turn the whole thing inside out. So anyway, I came up with the idea of making this small container, and to have the inside turn to the outside. I did it like blinds, almost like blinds that you would have in a window, and I had one material on one side and then the other material on the other side, and so you just kind of open and close it like blinds, and it would change from the one texture to the other. And the texture I came up with for the inside was this really beautiful green velvet, and then the outside was interesting but maybe not beautiful, and it was like a fake snake skin. And I made the snake skin out of masking tape that I used like a wood stain to stain the masking tape and make it look like snake scales. So anyway, I turned this in, and then the professor said the statement about all art is self-portrait. And I actually felt a little bit insecure after he said that, looking at what I had done, because the interior was really pretty, but the exterior was cool looking, but not really what you would call pretty. And then by comparison, my friend Kim in the class had, I don't remember what the inside of her piece looked like, but the texture on the outside was this beautiful golden wire that had been made. She had bent it into like all these little curly cues, and that definitely looked like her exterior, because she had the most amazing blonde tendrils that really did look a lot like the gold wire. So you could absolutely see from Kim's piece that yes, all art is self-portrait. And then again, I felt a little bit insecure, because if that was the case, then I was kind of saying that I was a little bit ugly or homely on the outside, but maybe better looking on the inside. So this is, like I said, this is more of a riddle or a thought experiment almost. But where you have your own creative practice, look at what you've already done, and think about, is it possible that what you did is self-portrait? And of course, a lot of times, especially if you're not doing visual art, then you're probably not addressing your physical appearance. But if it is your art that you're making, it probably is accessing your inner worlds, your inner self. So it's definitely worth thinking about and examining what you've already done, and ask yourself, how is this self-portrait? What is this revealing about myself? And then also think about, what would you do in the future with art, where you could be incorporating this, and the future art is some sort of self-portrait. And maybe you don't want to see that through, maybe you have some other idea that excites you more for your creative practice. But it's definitely worth thinking about as a fun riddle and just as a thought experiment. And if I look at the art that I do currently, which is predominantly oil paintings, they're still lifes, I don't know that I could say that it really matches my external appearance, but I think it highlights a lot about my internal self, my inner self. I do still lifes of assembled natural objects, and a big theme of the art is that it's seeking beauty in ordinary things. And I might have something like a fossil shell found on the beach, and the fossil shell is gray and it's broken and it's got wormholes in it. But I try to find the beauty in that. And then I might pair it with something that's more traditionally beautiful, like a flower or a feather or even a luna moth or something like that. But usually my pieces will have something that isn't considered traditionally beautiful, and I try to make it beautiful. And that is how I try to approach life. I do try to seek beauty and look for the beauty in most things, and try to find the good in most things, in most situations. And I mean, sometimes I can't, sometimes something is just bad and I don't see any beauty in it at all. But I try to, and most of the time I do, and I'm able to achieve that. And so, like I said, that is definitely something that comes across, I think, in my art. So think about how you could possibly be showing your inner self in your art as a self-portrait, or even your external self. And again, if you just think about how could you do more of this, and maybe you don't ever see that through, and it's just a thought experiment, but this still will help enhance your creativity. It's an interesting way to think about your creative practice that maybe you haven't thought of before. So what do you think? Is all art self-portrait, or is that ridiculous? And do you agree with that, or do you disagree with it? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. And also comment if you can give an example of how maybe you've decided something that you've already done is self-portrait in some way. So again, my name is Amanda McKay, and thank you so much for watching.